Britain in the early 1940s was honestly a scary place to live. The Second World War touched everything. Families lived behind blackout curtains. Ration books told you what you could and couldn't eat. And every night, people listened for the drone of enemy planes overhead, wondering if their city would be next. Now, the whole country was fighting to survive, but the West Midlands carried a particular weight. Birmingham was nicknamed the Workshop of War. It churned out Spitfires, ammunition, vehicles, anything to keep the war effort moving. Coventry? It was stacked with armament factories. Wolverhampton, Dudley, Walsall, all hammering, forging, producing at breakneck speed. But that painted a giant target on the region. Coventry was basically flattened in the Blitz of November 1940. A single night left hundreds dead and a cathedral in ruins. Birmingham suffered wave after wave of bombings, displacing thousands. Outside of London, the West Midlands was one of the most bombed places in the entire country. Meanwhile, the countryside was transformed. RAF bases, radar stations, and training grounds. Whole patches of farmland swallowed up by military strategy. Railways carried troops and supplies across the nation, making the region absolutely essential to the war machine. And in all of this chaos, with evacuees, blackouts and bombings, people went missing. Sometimes it was recorded, often it wasn't. And that kind of uncertainty? It was the perfect breeding ground for rumours. Whispers of spies, double agents, saboteurs hiding in plain sight. And right in the middle of all that came the story of Bella, a woman whose body would be discovered in the strangest of places. Hello and welcome to Dead Curious, the place to be if, like me, you're dead curious about true crime. I'm Adi, and today we're diving into one of the eeriest unsolved cases in British history, the woman in the Wych Elm. This one has everything. A chilling discovery, graffiti that refuses to fade, and theories ranging from drunken pranks to Nazi espionage. It's baffled investigators, inspired folklore, and haunted the West Midlands for over 80 years. And if you enjoy this story, do me a favour, hit subscribe. It helps the channel grow and means I can keep bringing you more of history's darkest mysteries.
You know, I'm just the guy to show you around England. Sure, I know all about it. Why shouldn't I? I've been here 3 weeks. Well, the first thing I think we ought to take a look at is an English pub.
Britain, 1943. The war's dragging into its 4th year. Entire city blocks are rubble. Blackout curtains are a nightly ritual. Families live with this gnawing uncertainty. Will my brother, my father, my son make it home? Out in Worcestershire, Hagley Wood stood quiet. Old, tangled trees, some of them centuries old, with roots that clawed into the earth like bony fingers. And in the middle of it all, one massive wych elm. Hollow, dark, almost like nature itself had carved out a vault. On April 18th, 4 teenage boys, Bob Farmer, Tom Willits, Fred Payne, and Bob Hart, went into the woods looking for birds' nests. They weren't meant to be there, but this was wartime Britain. No TV, no phones, no TikTok. Adventure was what you made of it. And that adventure took a turn when someone dared Bob Farmer to climb the elm. What he found inside would change Hagley Wood forever. Bob scrambled up and leaned into the hollow trunk. At first it was just damp and dark, smelling of rot. Then he noticed a pale, round shape. It looked like an animal skull, so he reached in, his fingers brushing against hair. And when he pulled it forward, crooked human teeth stared back at him. 13 years old, alone in the woods and staring into the hollowed-out face of a skull. I can't even imagine how horrifying that must have been. Bob bolted down, pale as a ghost, and told the others. They all panicked. Remember, they were trespassing and they didn't want to be caught. The last thing they wanted was trouble with the police, so they swore to keep it a secret. But kids can't keep secrets like this. That night, the youngest boy couldn't stand it and told his dad. By the next day, police were combing Hagley Wood. And what they pulled out of that tree was far worse than anyone had ever expected. Wedged inside was the complete skeleton of a woman, forced down so tightly it was obvious she hadn't ended up there by accident. Shreds of clothing still clung to the bones, a shoe, and a cheap gold wedding ring. Nearby, half buried in the soil, they found something else. A human hand, severed. Whether it was cut deliberately or taken by animals, no one could say. But it was enough to set the rumour mill spinning immediately. A woman hidden in a tree, her bones folded into the hollow, her hand in the dirt beside her. Who was she, and why hide a body like that? The remains went to Professor James Webster, a pathologist at Birmingham University. His findings gave us our first glimpse of Bella. She was a woman around 35 years old, about 5 feet tall, with light brown hair. The feature that stood out most? Her crooked front teeth. They overlapped in a way that should have made her easy to identify. But that wasn't all. Inside her throat, wedged deep, was a piece of cloth. She'd been gagged, suffocated, possibly even still alive while her body was forced into the tree. And that's important because rigor mortis would have made it impossible to fold her into the hollow later. Whoever killed her stuffed her in there almost immediately after death. Webster estimated she'd been dead at least 18 months, and that puts the crime in late 1941, the height of the blackout years, a time when shadows were thick, streets were dark, and people could vanish unnoticed. Police hoped her teeth would lead to a match. They checked dentists across the region, but they got nothing. They compared missing person reports. Still, nothing. But remember, wartime was chaos. Evacuations, relocations, bombings. People disappeared and weren't always reported. The woman in the tree remained nameless, at least until someone gave her one. Six months later, the first graffiti appeared, scrawled in chalk on a Birmingham wall. Who put Blue Bella down the wych elm? More soon followed, all in the same hand, until the wording stuck. Who put Bella in the wych elm? And just like that, the nameless skeleton became Bella. But who was behind the writing? Was it the killer taunting police? Someone with inside knowledge? Or just a prankster making mischief? No one was ever caught, but the graffiti lived on. It's popped up again and again in the 70s, the 90s, even as recently as 2020. Always the same chilling question, sometimes altered, like one that read, "Hers put Bella in the wych elm." It's become the case's most iconic detail. Bella's story carved into brick and stone, refusing to fade. This is where things get complicated and kind of wild. Over the years, several theories have been thrown around about who Bella was and how she ended up in that tree. In the 1950s, journalist Wilfred Byford Jones received letters from a woman calling herself Anna. She later revealed herself as Una Hainsworth, estranged wife of Jack Mossop. According to Una, Jack came home one night in 1941, pale and shaken. He told her he and a Dutchman named Van Ralt had been out drinking with a woman. She passed out, and instead of taking her home, they shoved her into a hollow tree as a joke. She never woke up. Jack was plagued by nightmares of a woman staring at him from inside the tree until he died in a mental asylum in 1942. Creepy? Absolutely. But evidence? None. Still, it lines up eerily with the timeline. This one's straight out of a Cold War thriller, except it happened during World War II. The Midlands were a hotbed of military production, making it a prime target for German espionage. And when an unknown woman's body shows up in such a strange way, the spy theory almost writes itself. One candidate? Clara Baul, a German cabaret singer and actress linked to Nazi agent Joseph Jacobs. Jacobs parachuted into Cambridgeshire in 1941 and was captured almost immediately. On him, police found a photograph of Clara. He claimed she was his lover and fellow agent due to parachute into the Midlands. Jacobs was executed. Clara vanished from records after 1941. She was 35, a performer familiar with the West Midlands, rumoured to speak English with a Birmingham accent. On paper, she matches Bella almost perfectly, and Clara Baul could easily have become Clarabella to the English tongue. Another lead points to a Dutch spy, Johan Dronkers, executed in London in 1942. Later, journalist Donald McCormick claimed German intelligence files described an agent who had a Dutch girlfriend in Birmingham called Clarabella Dronkers, around 30 years old, with crooked teeth. Sound familiar? And here's the kicker. Bella's remains were later lost. After the post-mortem, her skeleton was sent to Birmingham University for study and completely vanished. Convenient if you believe in cover-ups, infuriating if you don't. Was Bella silenced because she was a spy, or is this just conspiracy thinking layered on top of tragedy? We'll never know, but it's the theory that refuses to die. A more down-to-earth possibility. In 1944, a Birmingham sex worker reported that a colleague named Bella had disappeared 3 years earlier. If true, Bella wasn't a spy, or a witch. She was a working-class woman who slipped through the cracks during wartime, which is tragic in its own right, and maybe the simplest explanation. Then we get to the creepiest theory of all. The tree was a wych elm, already associated with witches in folklore. The severed hand sparked talk of the Hand of Glory, a grotesque talisman made from the hand of a hanged criminal. Archaeologist Margaret Murray even suggested Bella was a ritual sacrifice. People tied it to the murder of Charles Walton in Warwickshire in 1945, which also carried whispers of witchcraft. Was this folklore stretching too far? Probably. But once that idea was out there, Bella's story became part crime scene, part ghost story. Bella's case never really faded. In 2005, another skeleton was found in Hagley Wood, sparking brief speculation before it was quietly dropped. Locals still point to the old pub once called the Gypsy Tent, now the Badger's Set, and whisper about encampments, hauntings, and forgotten connections. Even researchers who've studied the official West Mercia police files left frustrated, promising leads like Una's testimony or links to the gypsy community were noted, but never really chased. The official investigation feels, in many ways, as hollow as the tree itself. Modern forensics could almost certainly have solved the mystery. DNA could tell us who Bella was, where she came from, even who her family might be. But we can't do that because her remains, the most important evidence, disappeared. In 2018, forensic artists created a haunting facial reconstruction from photographs of her skull. But without DNA, it's just a sketch, a ghost of an identity. In 2023, a BBC podcast publicly appealed to museums, do you have Bella's bones? But as of today, the answer is still no. So here's what we do know. Bella was gagged. She was forced into the tree quickly, maybe while still alive. Her death was deliberate. Everything else? It's shadows. Prank, spy, sex worker, witchcraft. Every theory paints a different Bella, but none are proven. And maybe that's why this case lingers, because she's still unknown, still waiting for her story to be told. Over 80 years later, Hagley Wood is still standing, quiet, mist curling around the roots of that same old elm. And Bella's story lingers too, half crime, half legend. So what do you think? Was Bella a spy caught in the gears of war? A woman whose night out turned fatal? Or something even stranger? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. This was the very first episode of Dead Curious. If you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss the next mystery. Until then though, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, some mysteries refuse to stay buried.